As you all know, we are in the middle of a cultural and spiritual revolution in our country and really the Western world today. There are questions surrounding us, surrounding gender, race, sexuality. It's in the news everywhere we go every day. And we have an obligation as Christians to respond to these issues in a compelling and intelligent manner. So that's why we're hosting a conference coming up in a few weeks. It's called Fearless Conference, Engaging Our Culture with Confidence. We have some scholars in these areas that will be speaking, as well as some everyday practitioners. It's May 14th and 15th. If you could only come on Saturday, come on Saturday. Sign up for that conference today. Get the early bird rate. It's minimal, and I guarantee you, you will be equipped to face what we're going through as a nation in this culture today. So sign up for the Fearless Conference if you haven't done that yet. By the way, we were announcing this at a deacons meeting, and they put that QR code on the screen, you know, we can look at with your phone. How many of you know what QR stands for? Raise your hand. If you know what QR and QR code stands for. Good, I do not feel so bad about myself. I didn't know what it meant, but someone yelled out, it means, yes, quick reference. That's what QR stands for. Nothing to do with the message today. I just thought I would increase our knowledge of technology. Years ago, I read a story, maybe 20, 25 years ago, that really gripped me. And it's a story that I kind of couldn't let go of, and many times I go back to it in my mind and my heart because I love the message that it portrays and teaches us. And it's a story about a guy, a Polish resistance fighter by the name of Stipolkowski, okay? And Stipolkowski, along with 16 of his friends, was fighting in the underground resistance movement during World War II to help try to overthrow the Nazis. Now, World War II was a crazy war, as you know. You had all kind of weird sides and alliances. So at the end of the war in 1945, Stipolkowski and his 15 friends found themselves at the wrong place at the wrong time and were captured by the Russian army and then brought to Russia to put on trial for war crimes. They were accused of treason against the state, which the opposite was the truth, and yet they were going to go to trial. And because there were some Western observers at the trial, the Russians had to get a full confession from these 16 Polish resistance fighters. Now, what they did was, to get a full confession, they interrogated these men night and day. They starved them. They accused them of all kinds of crimes, of all kinds of motives. They went into their background, their family life, their sex life, their friends, their work, all the information that these folks could get to wield power on these 16 men to get them to confess to treason. 15 out of the 16 men confessed. Though they didn't do it, they confessed. They couldn't handle the pressure. There was over 141 interrogations. Brutal, brutal. But Stipolkowski never confessed. Stipolkowski never caved in. No matter how difficult, no matter how painful, no matter how guilty and shameful he may have felt about all those things that they brought up to attack him, Stipolkowski stood strong. Now, we'll come back to him a little bit later in the message and talk about how he did that. But for now, think about that for a second. Now, you probably will never be under a bright light and interrogated like he was. But we live in a time and an age where people with their thumbs can say things about you, say things about me that can literally destroy us. We live in a time where slander and gossip can be so weaponized, it can absolutely devastate your life if you don't know how to deal with it, if you don't know how to handle it. And even sometimes when you have criticism come your way and someone confronts you, and it's true, we still don't know how to handle that and process our way through it. Well, every crisis we have in our life, even the crisis of criticism, whether it's true criticism or false criticism, every crisis we have is an opportunity. It's an opportunity. And if anybody knows anything about how to handle accusations and criticism, and when people are throwing heat and shade and ripping you apart with their words, no one knows better how to handle that than our main man, Paul. Paul was a guy who wrote 13 out of the 27 books in the New Testament. Paul was a guy who was criticized from the left, criticized from the right. He was always facing massive amounts of criticism and gossip and slander wherever he went. That was just his lot in life. Some people get lucky. So Paul today in this passage is going to show us just a little bit, there's more that we'll get to later, but just a little bit about how he dealt with criticism and pain that was coming his way. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter number 4, verses 1 through 5. 1 Corinthians 4, 1 through 5. He said, "This then is how you ought to regard us as servants of Christ and as those entrusted with the mysteries God has revealed. Now it's required that those who have been given a trust must prove faithful. I care very little if I am judged by you or by any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself." Did you hear the click sound when I read that verse? Click. Paul took it to a whole nother level here because he's at a place where I'm not there yet. I'm trying to get there. I'm striving. Maybe some of you were there, see me after class. Paul's at a place where he's saying, I don't care what you're saying about me. I don't care how you judge me. I don't care what your post about me on Facebook and Instagram and what you're tweeting out says about me. I don't care about that. He goes, I don't even judge myself. Verse 4, my conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It's the Lord who judges me. Therefore, judge nothing before its appointed time. Wait until the Lord comes. He will bring to light what is hidden in darkness and will expose the motives of the heart. And at that time, each will receive their praise from God. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Baloney. That's not true. I've had my bones and body beaten many, many times, but the words hurled against me, they hurt much more than the beatings, much more. So I don't know who came up with that maxim that we learned as kids. It simply ain't true. Words hurt. Words sting. Words bruise. Words affect the way we see ourselves, the way we see the world, the way we see. It affects everything about our life, especially when we're receiving words that are destructive and critical. Now, Paul's at a point right now where he's like, you know what? I've received so much heat, so much criticism. I'm beyond that. I'm beyond that. I'm at a different place, and he wants us to be at that place. I really believe it. So how do we do it? How do we process accusations? How do we process criticism? I think whether it's false criticism or real criticism, how do we process that in a constructive way? How is that particular crisis or painful situation that we all will endure in some level in our life, how is that an opportunity for us? And how do we make it through that? We know that Stipelkowski made it through. How do we make it through? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to see this as a growth opportunity. We have to say, I am going to grow through it. I'm going to grow through it. Remember a few weeks ago, I talked about, that coach in 7th grade who wrote something in my year book about how I've improved, how weak, and I needed to lift weights. That was constructive criticism. That helped me. He said I literally needed to grow. So you have to see this opportunity, this circumstance in your life, no matter how difficult and painful it is, no matter where the source is this is an opportunity for growth. We all prayed that prayer a few weeks ago. God, help me to grow. The bad news is many times growth comes through pain, right? Speaking of weights and working out, remember that? No pain, no gain. No weights, no dates. No curls, no girls. It goes on and on, right? So that's just how it is. That's how it is. And we're going through times where we feel like we're being ripped apart and ripped to shreds and people are saying critical things about us. We can see this as a time to kind of hide away in our cave, but we've got to see this as a time for growth in our life, a time of growth. I mean, a quote that's helped me a lot in dealing with stuff is a quote by Nietzsche where he said, that which doesn't kill us outright only makes us stronger. That's Kelly Clarkson. No, I really think she probably got it from Nietzsche. Call me crazy, okay? So I'm just going to look at my life, and a Christian version of that quote will be Romans 8:28, where Paul said, all things work together for good, those who love God and called according to his purpose. I'm going to see that life is for me. All of life is for me. Even the painful parts of life, the parts of life that I don't want, the parts of life that are hurtful, the parts of life that I don't understand, they're a little bit crazy and painful. I'm going to see that as an opportunity that God's going to use in my life to grow me up, that I might become stronger, that I might become better, that I might become more passionate for God and for his purposes in my life. So when you're taking the heat and the sticks and stones have been put away and the words are slamming down on you, see this as an opportunity for growth. Say, I will grow through it. The next thing we have to do is we've got to be willing to serve through it. Serve through it. That's what he said right in those verses 1 and 2. He said, that's the first thing I do. Paul says, I'm a servant. And the term that he uses here for servant is the term under rower. It's a strange term. It's an under rower. And what it refers to, one of the best movies of all time is a movie called Ben-Hur. Ben-Hur. Great movie, 80 million years ago, Charlton Heston, but it's about this Jewish slave by the name of Ben-Hur. And at one part in the movie, he's at the bottom of this massive Roman ship, and he's chained to his oar, and he's just rowing, rowing, rowing. That's what it means to be an under rower. An under rower, a servant. Paul says in the midst of all the shade being thrown my way, in the midst of the criticism, you know what? I'm just going to put my head down and go to work. I'm a servant. God's called me to plant these churches. God's called me to do what I'm doing, and that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to be a servant. That's who I am, and I'm going to do it what? Faithfully. Faithfully. Like Booker T. Washington said last week, I'm going to do common things in an uncommon way. I'm going to pursue excellence in my work. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and say, okay, how can I serve in this situation? I know bad things are swirling out there around you. I know words are being said. I know this said, he said, she said, this said, what said, whatever. But you know what? God's called me to be a servant. God's called me to help people in the situation I'm in and to get my eyes off of myself, off of the stuff out there, and onto him and serving him faithfully. That's what Paul did. Again, if anybody knows how to deal with criticism and deal with the heat and deal with the interrogation, it's Paul. He said, listen, I am a servant. I've been entrusted by God with the gospel. And I want to be faithful on how I communicate the gospel, how I live the gospel, and how in my situation I serve God. So all of my life is unto God. All of my life is seen as a service to Him. And I want to serve. I want to be that under rower. So you serve through it. What else? Look at verses 3 and 5. You trust through it. You trust through it. Paul was at that level, wasn't he? I hear that all the time. Well, I don't care what other people think about me. Really? Really? Now, if you really, really believe that, you're a sociopath. I mean, that's what a sociopath, you really know, I don't care. I mean, we all care what other people think about us. We all do. Paul did. But Paul had grown in such a way that he realized, to use this unique phrase, at the end of the day, he was going to be judged by God Himself. He said, I can't even judge myself. I can't even judge myself. And you can't judge me. I can't judge myself. God's going to judge me. And Paul knew that God had already judged him. God's already judged you. At the cross. God judged Paul at the cross. Paul's reputation was on the cross. His sins were on the cross. His guilt and his shame of all the things he did, they were on the cross. He knew that he was accepted by God, justified by God. The verdict, not guilty and righteous, had already been passed on Paul. So he could take the heat. He could take these criticisms against his character and against what he was doing and his ministry because he knew who he was. He knew Christ. He knew the grace of God. So in this process of being criticized and taking hate or whatever that looks like for you, it's a chance to rediscover the grace of God. Does that make sense? You rediscover the grace of God in a really deep and personal way. Paul didn't have to justify himself. Though we spent all of 2 Corinthians doing that, but he didn't have to. God's going to judge me. God's going to hold everybody accountable. And when I stand before God, I don't want to be judged on me and my record. I don't want to be judged on Christ and His record. I need to be forgiven. I need to be cleansed, washed, declared righteous by Christ. That's what gives me confidence. That's what should give you confidence to face the pain and the disappointment and criticism when it comes your way. And then you just trust God with it. God, I trust you with my character. I trust you with my reputation. I trust you to use this moment and times and things and season in my life as a time of growth, as a time of me to get my eyes off myself and start serving God. I commit by my will. I will grow through this. I will serve through this. I will trust you through this. And we rediscover the gospel. Judgment's already been passed. Verdict, not guilty, already declared over you and me. Jesus said it Himself, it's finished. And from that basis, I can live my life. And from that basis, I can rebuild. From that basis, I can watch God's redemption work in my life. Not in order to be justified, not in order to be saved by my works, but because I've already been justified. I'm already saved. I've already been judged. And now I'm a child of God by His grace. By His grace. Stapelkowski, the Polish resistance fighter, on trial for treason. They hurled all these accusations in him night after night, day after day, interrogation after interrogation, bringing up things from his past, things that he did, he said, all of this stuff. And Stapelkowski responded to his accusers, you know what, you're exactly right. I did all those things. As a matter of fact, I did a whole lot worse stuff than that. And by presenting himself to God honestly, day by day, moment by moment, during that brutal time of interrogation, he was able to make it through. Because why? He knew he had already been justified by Christ. He knew that Christ had forgiven him of his sins. He knew that he was a child of God. He didn't need to justify himself. He could be honest before God and honest before his accuser, and then stand for truth when they were accusing him of something that he did not do. And he was freed. The only one out of the 16 people, he was freed and acquitted by the grace of God. Pray with me. God, I thank you that your grace is real. Your grace is more real than the chair we're sitting in and the sounds that we're hearing inside of our minds. And the memories we have of our past, of shame. And God, your grace is more real than those thoughts, more real than those memories. Your grace is more real. Thank you that you came to set us free. Thank you that you came to not to just set us free, but to connect us with you and with your community, that we can live a different way, a new life.